Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week, as we usually do, with an album review, going through an entire album track by track, exploring what each track is doing in isolation and is part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at something I've been looking forward to for a while. Last month, or maybe the month before, it was definitely sometime this year, during a live stream, I was introduced to the band Love Letter. I got to check out one song from their first EP and one song from their first LP. They are a new band, they only have an EP and an LP, but I got to hear a track from each of them. And today we are looking at their debut LP called You Look Good in Red. We have 12 tracks here, 42 minutes in length. We're looking at something along the lines of emo, alt-rock, maybe post-hardcore. I'm excited. I wanted to dive into this album as soon as the live stream was over, and I was informed that someone was going to request it. So I've been waiting eagerly for this to finally get picked, and I'm glad we're getting to it this week. It is a little earlier than I expected, though. I thought I'd have a little more time. I wanted to check out the EP on my own first, but that unfortunately didn't happen. And it wasn't until right now that I realized this was Love Letter. You know, the band I've been wanting to check out for a while. I knew that it was, it seemed familiar to me when I put the schedule together earlier this week, but it didn't really dawn on me why I knew the bands. So I had time to check out the EP. It just slipped my mind. It's 2026. Y'all know how this goes, man. There's a lot going on. So we're going to kick it off with this first track called Lie to Me. It's less than 3 minutes in length. There's a couple of tracks that are less than 3. Nothing greater than 4. Nothing that gets into the 5 range. So we're looking at 12 shorter tracks. Let's kick it. See what's going on with this first track, Lie to Me. Yeah, so it's all in 4/4, but we have a heavy triplet feel in the first half. Ooh. That snare, dude, you can't ignore that. Yeah. We're still keeping it mellower, but I thought we were just going to keep that light atmosphere through to the ends. For a split second, I thought that might have gone into the next track, and I was going to be conflicted about stopping it or not. I'm really glad they didn't. Yeah, I think this is a good introduction based off of what we checked out on the live stream, which I'll finally put that card up there if you're interested in that. The song we checked out from this album is Falling Apart. It's track number 4. We'll get there relatively quickly, I would say, given how short these tracks are. But this is what I expect from them. Very emo, very post-hardcore, lots of screaming, lots of atmosphere, but also a tenderness to it at times. There is a mellowness that goes along with the general tension that exists through a majority of this track, and pushing towards something a bit mellower in the final moments, if I remember correctly, is what Falling Apart also did, though I might be confusing that with the other track we checked out from them. But yeah, I'm sold on this. This is a strong first track. This is my kind of music. We don't listen to this kind of this side of punk too often on the channel, as we are kind of rock and metal oriented more than a punk side. But this is my teenage years. This is my 20-something years. This is so nostalgic and familiar to me, and I love everything about this. Well, okay, most about this. It has some blemishes to it that I'm gonna have to. They're hurdles to get over. Not everything you listen to is phenomenal, even if the whole package is something that's up your alley. There's going to be portions of it that, they're not perfect. That's normal for everything. I have listened to so much music in the 30 whatever years of age I am, and I don't think I've ever heard a perfect song. As in all forms of art, it's created by humans. Art is created by humans, and humans are flawed. So humans tend to create flawed art. So having issues with this is normal. And in fact, I would say that if anyone ever says that a film or music or TV show or a work of art or dance or anything that they've seen is perfect, they're not paying enough attention to it. That's how I feel about it at the end of the day. There are imperfections that you can gloss over, and it might be perfect for you, but it is by no means a perfect work of art. And that's kind of where I'm sitting with this. There are some imperfections to this, and let's kick off with that. I don't know why. Let's start with the bad stuff. I think it'll make the good stuff that I have to say later better in some way. The production on this. I made the same comment when we checked it out in the live stream. The EP's production was different. I don't remember if it was worse or just like some parts were better and some parts, I don't remember. Both of the productions were very interesting. This one in particular, though, I think has good guitar presence. The bass is fine. The vocals are very present, though. You can hear both of the vocalists at every time. There's a lot of clarity to them despite the grit on the harshes. It's the drums, though, dude. That snare is a choice. Oh man, it is an open snare, so we don't have the rattling of the beads underneath it. It's what gives it the garbage can sound. It isn't quite the Stay in Anger snare sound because I don't believe this is a steel drum, but it still has the very wide, reverberary thunk without any of the sizzle of the snare beads underneath rattling on the bottom drum head. But it's so high in the mix too. Between that and the bass, I think maybe being able to have a little bit boost in here, it's not a perfect mix for me. I think I'd prefer the drums coming down a little, the bass coming up a little. But overall, I think there's enough clarity in here, and I really appreciate that, especially since this genre of music, especially for people who are doing retro revival, which I think is what this is. It's a 2025 release that is definitely looking back to this specific sound of the mid to late 2000s, early 2010s. A lot of times you'll hear a band try to replicate the production as well, and honestly, this just wasn't a great era for production. Many of my favorite albums are ones that I love in spite of the production choices. Sometimes it was financial because some of these bands just weren't really big. They were still a bit underground. But sometimes it was just the sound they wanted to make. I mean, the 2000s were a very compressed time in general. And it wasn't a great era for production in my mind. And trying to replicate that sound does bring nostalgic factors to mind, but I also think that there should be, well, here's the thing, like artistic intent, right? Who am I to tell an artist what they should be doing with their art? But at the same time, I think I would prefer music that takes the best parts of an older style and updates them. If you're going to revive an old sound, revive it better. You have the foresight and the intelligence of, decades since the sound was popular. Why stick with all the caveats that it had back in the day? So I'm of two minds on that. Regardless, I think this is fine-ish. It does have nostalgic value to it, though, because, like I said, many of my favorite albums that this band is pulling inspiration from, I love them despite the production values on them. Now, that's pretty much my only negative on this track. I could probably use a little more cleans, but we'll see how that goes across the album. This might just be an incredibly heavy start to this album. I love the atmosphere to this. It is palpable, it is dense, there is a heavy weight pressed down just from the size of all these instruments. There's a darkness harmonically to a lot of this, which I think is probably on theme for our track called Lie to Me, which is probably about feeling anger that someone lied to you. We'll check out the lyrics in a bit. But to me, that seems like this is pretty a good synergistic element here. This heaviness and darkness is paired with screaming from the vocals in pretty much every part of this track. There's this anger, there's this darkness, there's this weight. I don't know if I'd necessarily say I feel betrayal in the music, but it definitely touches on the core feelings here of anger and sorrow, and maybe even when we incorporate the final minute of this track, a bit of vulnerability, which is certainly where we can kind of veer the conversation towards that betrayal theme. I think there's two main parts in here that stand out to me compositionally, because let's be honest, this is mostly an atmospheric track. And honestly, throughout this entire album, I'm expecting mostly atmospheric ideas. I don't think I'm going to have a lot to talk about regarding melodies, maybe even harmonies and rhythm. We did have some interesting rhythmic devices in this, which I'm happy to talk about, but this brand of music I don't think is really defined by complexity, and I'm not expecting a lot of it here. But we do have a little bit of rhythmic complexity at the beginning, which I thought was interesting. We kicked it off with a 4/4 time signature, which persisted through the entire song, but we divided that into a triplet feel for the first half, and then the straightforward 4/4, the quarter note feel in the back half. And this gave it this push and pull. Might just be a musical thing. Maybe we'll see something in the lyrics. I can tie this into something larger, but it feels cool. Unfortunately, we don't really see too much of this throughout the track. We do return back to this idea once, but the concept of rhythmic juxtaposition, it's not a key element of this song. And the opening kind of teed me up for more of that. And I'm not going to say I was let down by a lack of it, but I do wish that it might have stuck with that a little more than it did. Y'all know, vocals, dude. Lots of harshes on this. I'm not a super big fan of this type of harsh. There's something about it that feels unrestrained, chaotic. I think I'm gonna grow onto it though. I think it's gonna grow on me. That's the phrase. Because I do tend to enjoy rawer vocals. And this is definitely rawer. Yes, that was intentional. And there is something very passionate about this vocal delivery, but I don't know. It hasn't quite clicked with me yet, and I'm hoping it will over the course of this album. But alongside these, we get some cleans. And I love the dual vocal lines, harshes and cleans layered on top of each other, sometimes singing the same things, sometimes singing different things in counterpoint. I'm just a sucker for moments like this, and I will always point them out when they appear. I am hoping, though, that this song ties into that a little bit. It is called Lie to Me, which it requires two people here, the liar and the receiver. Or in the very least, maybe it's a command, I want you to lie to me. In which case there is still a you and an I. And having dual vocals in here of different texture, of different timbre, of different vocal approach gives them very distinct feels and allows them to be easily mapped to two different perspectives or possibly people. And I really hope that I get into the lyrics and there's some sort of division between these two and what they're saying, what they're wanting. I can see it happening. I really hope it is. I'm going to be real excited if that's in here. So yeah, dude, I knew this coming in though. I think both of the tracks we listened to on the live stream had this layered vocal approach. I hope the whole album has it. I'm looking forward to it. There isn't a lot to do with the rest of the song though. The bass is bassing. The guitar is doing a lot of arpeggiation. There's that one really cool eighth note lick that goes on here that helped transition between one section to another in the middle of the track, but was also present underneath the opening verse. Very cool idea there. It is just one lick though. Everything else the guitar does is chords or arpeggiation. Arpeggiation just means playing notes in the chord order, whether you're ascending or descending. You can skip around too. You don't necessarily have to go every one. If you do like the first, the third, the fifth, and the eighth, that's a pretty standard arpeggio right there. Captures the key tones of the chord. So it doesn't have to be perfectly in order, but it is just rising and falling. You're basically playing along the chord. You're not writing a riff or a melody. But it does work at creating momentum and movement in a track that could otherwise be fairly static if you're just playing a chord and letting it ring out. The drum work is fairly straightforward. There's some interesting ornamental ideas that the drummer throws in. Cool couple of drum riffs, drum fills. But it's a straightforward track right here. There's not a lot going on. Very vocal focused at delivering the intensity, the energy, and any sort of variability to the track, which I think it does well, carving that space and allowing the vocals to be that dynamic factor on this track. I am also curious about the structure though. It felt linear. I find that to be really interesting. We do have a little change at the end too. We bring the energy way down, purely clean vocals, and I think the rumble of a guitar chord fading out underneath it for a bar. I thought this was going to wrap up the song, but instead we amped it back up, not up to a 10, but maybe up to a 7, bringing the distorted instruments and the drums back in while still retaining the clean vocals and having a mellower atmosphere overall, a mellower chord progression, not quite getting to the intensity of what we saw at the beginning, but certainly bringing that heavy weight back to the table. I thought this was a great way to keep the song feeling vulnerable and mellow while avoiding the idea of just staying in an isolated segment for the end of the track. Yeah, a cool little twist there, but also quite linear. I think this is interesting. For 2 minutes and 40 seconds, I would expect a verse, chorus, bridge idea, and instead, again, I don't know what the structure is on this. There was, I think, a repeated part. Maybe we had like verse, chorus, verse, bridge, outro, or something along the lines. It's more linear than cyclical, which is interesting to me for this style of music. All right, let's check out some lyrics. Okay, I don't know that I completely understand this track, which is interesting because I don't think there's a lot of metaphor to it. It just has conflicting messaging. The first verse says, I can't let go, I've held on too tight, turned away, you stabbed me in the back, lie to me, lie to me. Okay. We have somebody who feels betrayed. Straightforward, very easy to understand. Verse 2 says, if only you knew how much I think about you, all the scars you left, what a bloody mess, maybe I feel too much, am I in love? Okay. So we have somebody who feels conflicted about this. They have been backstabbed by someone. They've been betrayed. They feel the pain of that, but they still want to be around them. Humans are messy. It's one of the great and terrible things of the human condition. Sometimes running electricity through meat doesn't always present rational thought and rational action. And so you can hate and love someone simultaneously for two very different reasons. Verse 3 says, I'm begging you to understand. Come here and take my hand. Trust me, soulmate. Okay. This is where things begin to fall apart for me, because the very next line or stanza is a repetition of lie to me, which in isolation could be read as a recollection of what has happened, much like in verse 1 when it says you stabbed me in the back, lie to me. But it could also be a demand here with an invisible you. You lie to me. Coming right after the idea of take my hand and trust me, soulmate, lie to me. I don't remember there being a very large gap, if any, between these stanzas in the song. Verse 4 says, soon the day will come where I'm all alone with nothing left to lose. I won't find much of you. Maybe I won't move on once you're really gone. Maybe I'm in love. Once again, not being able to disconnect the feelings of infatuation for this person. The outro says, I had a feeling you would visit me in one of my dreams again, but I didn't expect it to feel this good. Your hair, your nose, your lips, you know how the rest of the story goes. I always wondered what it would have been like if you had known. If they had known what? This is what I don't understand. They're obviously of two minds about this person. They feel betrayed by them, but they are still in love with them. They want them in their life, but they've been hurt by them. That part I get. But I feel like I'm missing something to understand what that next, the continuation of this thought process is. The repetition of lie to me got, well, at least in my mind, it felt like it was getting angrier and angrier. I don't know if each repetition was screamed louder or more abrasively. I remember the last one was isolated. The music cut out entirely. We had just the vocals there. It felt intense. It felt like someone who was hurt. Why would this come off of the idea of trust me, soulmate? And what is the ending about? This person gone, so they visit in a dream? Is it about them wishing that things have been different? I don't know. There's a lot of conflicted ideas here, both I think in the narrative, storytelling of it, but also within the person themselves, within this character. Maybe them being confused about how they feel about this person is represented in some of the confusion of the lines, so that me as the audience also feels confusion, putting me in the shoes of our narrator here. I don't know. It's an interesting decision to start off with confusion as your first track theme. This next song, though, is called My God, It Was Wonderful. Let's see what's going on here. And then the screech. Oh. Oh. I don't know. Okay, there's a very bright high end to the snare. It might be a steel drum, actually. That third beat feels suspended for a moment before crashing back down on the one. Interesting to see where they decide to push the vocals out to make room for the scream versus where they just layer them both on top in the center. I like how the bass has more room to explore here. Okay. Yeah, a bit of a day to remember there at the end, which is interesting because they are shouting "Remember Me," but that's the band that that I think of in that final moment as we kind of move into a bit of a breakdown. You know, pick a note, da da dun da 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 dun, just kind of create this rhythmic groove on a single tone, and then screaming off to the sides. Yeah, this is a cool track right here. We're gonna start with a double-edged sword here. I got to hear the bass, which is very cool, and it had moving bass lines too. I didn't really make out too much of the bass work on the first track. It seemed to follow along with what the guitars were doing for the most part. Since the guitars were arpeggiating, I mostly heard pedal tone out of the bass, but here we had some moving melodic phrases there in the second verse, I think it was. But here's the problem. the bass is very muddy. It is a very wide tone, and as they play faster, which we heard there at the ends, with the syncopated ideas, da dun dun da dun, that da da dun, those yeah, 3 notes back to back there. It's kind of hard to hear the individual hits there. It's much easier when the guitars come in because they have thinner tones, so you can hear beginnings and ends to each of them. Whereas on the bass, the beginning of a note kind of gets swept up in the decay, the tail of the note that precedes it. I wish the bass had maybe a heavier attack to it at the minimum, but maybe just got cleaned up a little bit on the a more preferable side of things to kind of remove as much of the reverb from it and make it a bit more of a sharper tone here. I understand that for something like Lie to Me, and for the big moments here, it fills in the low end massively. And so having all this reverb and size is really good for moments like that. But anytime that it's going to take lead, it's going to be a little bit of a muddier sound. It's going to be too much overlap between notes. And I found that it just became a little difficult to discern what was happening at times. I felt that there was a general movement, but I couldn't always discern what that movement was. And so once again, a little bit of a double-edged sword here, particularly looking at production. But I do love that I got to hear the bass, and now that I can key into what exactly the bass sounds like, I heard more of it in the larger stacked sections, but it is overshadowed quite a bit by the guitars, which have more form to them, more clarity to what they're doing, where the bass still feels a bit amorphous and muddy underneath that. It does a great job of creating a foundation. It doesn't do such a great job of being a lead instrument. And this is one of those cases where, I've talked about this in the past, you'll often have guitarists who have multiple tones set up. A lead tone, a rhythm tone, a solo tone, and they've got their foot pedals and they'll change to whatever they need for each individual moment. Maybe even some songs or sections, maybe they'll have something high reverb for a clean electric section, and then they'll have no reverb when they go distorted. Guitarists are always playing around with their tone. Bassists kind of don't. And this is a case where I think that having a bassist with preset tones to shift between for specific roles that they're playing would really elevate this. And it's something that I wish rock had picked up on a long time ago. I know there are certainly bassists out there who do this. It just doesn't seem as common practice as it is for guitarists in the rock, metal, or punk world. And I think that's a bit of a shame. Though I will say that we haven't really heard too much variety on the guitars either. There is a lighter, mellower guitar sound and a heavier one, but that's it. And I think that's more about the needs of the song more so than the needs of a role. When the song drops down, you can't have massive distorted guitars for moments like that. You need to have something a little lighter. The song demands it. And the song didn't really demand the bass to change much because it did a good job of matching its tone to it. It just didn't match its size to the section as well. But once again, I'm coming at this from a non-punk direction, and I think for the most part, people are going to enjoy what the bass is doing here because it's got that big sound. And from what I kind of get, especially in the post-hardcore and emo world, bass is better. You want largeness of size. This is the kind of music you buy $20 headphones for that promote bassiness to them, where it's just kind of a muddy low end that people really like for some reason. And this is the kind of song that I think would work well on that, just because people love that kind of largeness to the low end. Anyways, double-edged sword there. Glad we got to hear the bass. Disappointed that I got to hear the bass the way it is. But, that's the rest of the song, though. Very cool stuff all around. We have this 3/4 feel with a heavily suspended third beat. We heard this at the beginning of the track, but I think it really is emphasized when we get into the chorus and the vocals join in on this phrasing as well. Because we have da-da-da-da, da 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 da, and I'm emphasizing that third beat. It isn't that long, it's the same length as the rest of it, but it feels like we're suspended. We don't have movement during it. There is just a held pitch, and then it comes crashing down with this really big bassy boom on beat one again. It happens really quick, but I do feel this back and forth of crushing weight to suspension or weightlessness back into the crushing weight. And I think that's a very cool sound to create, an atmosphere to sonically perfect for the audience to be stuck within. I think when we pair this with the duality of the vocals and we have this constant back and forth that kind of feels chaotic. Am I supposed to feel weightless? Am I supposed to feel crushed under pressure? It kind of happens so quickly, it's tough to get a sense of your bearings at all. You're constantly being thrust into the air and slammed back down into the earth, and while all of that is happening, the vocals are bouncing around as well. You have layered harshes and cleans in the center, then the cleans get pushed out to the side, very hard, distant panned. Now they're surrounding you while someone's still screaming at you over here, and then the vocals come back together, and then they're moving again, and then it's just harshes, and then it's just clean, and it's disorienting. In the moment, I don't think that I would describe this as chaotic, but when I really break down everything that's happening and how much movement is going on, it is disorienting. And I think that's very cool to take that concept and make it palatable. No part in this track did I ever feel lost. Did I feel overwhelmed? Did I feel that it was too difficult to follow? But the more that I think about it, the more that those themes are present. And that's very cool. In art, you can certainly subject the audience to a vibe or present a vibe to them. And I think both of those are very different and can achieve things in different ways. Not one of them is not better than the other, but one of them is better suited to an idea than the other. One is more of a textual understanding of a theme or a feeling or a vibe, and the other is a more empathetic one where you are put into the shoes of a person. And I think this does a really good job of creating something a bit more textual where you can understand it without being subjected to it. I think the last thing I want to bring up here then is the drums. We got to hear some really cool drum ideas on this one, a little bit more melodic work on the cymbals in that first verse. Very cool phrases in there. It was also nice to get a little bit of reprieve from that snare drum, though when it came back in the bit more of the open atmosphere, there's a very bright high end to it. It's quite possible we are looking at a snare drum, a steel drum with the snare beats turned off, which is in the same family of snare work that we heard on Saint Anger. So if you're 2 songs in and you're like, I can't get past the snare, I'm getting flashbacks to Saint Anger snare, I hate that album too, Bryan, I don't know how you do this, why is Saint Anger your favorite Metallica album? I get it, dude. If you gotta dip out on this one, it's not the best part of the album. I can agree with that. I'm learning to deal with it, just like I learned to deal with it on Saint Anger. It's not my favorite part of the album, but dang, that album has some fantastic riff writing. I'm not going to get sidetracked. We're not going to talk about... I need to do a full video on why I enjoy Saint Anger the way I do, because everyone seems flabbergasted by it. It's sort of incredulous that that I rank it so highly. Anyways, back to Love Letter. I get it, dude. The snare is abrasive. It is a sound, though. The open, the open snare as well as the steel drum were kind of prevalent in a lot of nu metal in the 2000s. Kind of worked its way a little bit into the rock sphere. I don't remember too much of it showing up in the punkier side, post-hardcore, emo stuff, but it was definitely a sound of the time. There's a reason Metallica and Lars chose to use it in their album. They were definitely reacting to changes in the sonic landscape of metal and a lot of popular rock and metal of the time. It wasn't arbitrary. And so Love Letter using it here is part of the fact that this is a love letter to punky 2000s music. Much like the production, I still wish it was something that they had paid a little more attention to and said, you know what, maybe we won't do that one. But there's a chance that this drummer, maybe even the whole band, really loves that sound. It isn't just something to deal with from the 2000s, it was something they love about the 2000s. In which case, more power to them. Again, who am I to tell them how to make their art? 2 tracks in, though, it is definitely a hurdle for me. But I did enjoy having a little bit of reprieve from that, and not only did we not have it for a few bars, but we also had some pretty sick cymbal work going on there, and I really appreciate hearing that. Alongside the bass taking some lead, we got some more melodic drum work going on here, so I'm pretty excited about how this album is going to develop, and kind of hoping that they continue to lean into a little bit more of these, I don't know if I'd call them progressive elements, but certainly more complex writing than we saw on Lie to Me, which I'm not saying was completely simple, but it definitely was more atmospheric, focused than this one was. Let's check out some lyrics. All right, preface here. This is definitely an emo album. We have another song about the end of a relationship. Looking at some of these titles, Falling Apart, With Everything in My Heart, See You Tomorrow, I'll Sing For You, I Love You, I Hate Your Guts. I think that's what this album's going to be primarily focusing on, is relationships, positive and negative, which is honestly fairly common for this style of music. After all, emo, or at least what emo became, very much built by hopeless romantics. So I don't know that we're going to have a lot to talk about on any of these songs other than, oh, here we go with another breakup track. But that's what we have here. And maybe these lyrical analyses will be shorter and shorter as we get through this album, as there's less new things to discuss. Let's dive into this though. It says, would it kill you to love, to fall in love again? I know that our love is jaded, but you're my best friend and I'm dying to see you, to hear your voice, but you've made it clear the ending is here. You're someone that I'll never see again. So we've already set this up that the other is ready to move on away from our narrator, but our narrator isn't ready to move on and wants to give this another shot. They do, however, end up accepting that this is over. The chorus says, I'll pray until the day that I'm dead, that in the afterlife we'll fall in love once again, and I hope you remember me, you'll smile, and you'll say you remember me. Don't forget what we shared, and don't forget how much I cared. It's interesting here. We have a heavy focus here on remembrance. I think there's a second layer to this. The priority of this track is certainly, I'm going to miss you when you're gone. I still love you, and I'm always going to love you. Very emo, sentimental stuff. But below that is a feeling of not wanting this time to be forgotten. And it makes me wonder how old this group of the group of people are who put this band together, who put this song together. Because the idea that the moments we spent together are so important that I don't ever want them to be forgotten seems to me to be a bit on the younger side. At least that's my take on it. Because I think once you kind of get older, you want to be remembered for what you've done. Usually your goals in life, the skills that you've crafted, what you want to do with those. You want to be remembered for how you have added to the world. Whereas I think generally the younger you are, you don't want moments to be forgotten because you haven't really had a chance to make your mark on the world, but you have made your mark on people. And so being remembered I think has a different scope and perspective for younger people to older people. Though I'm not going to say that that is completely true across the board. I'm painting with very large paintbrushes right here. But there's a heavy focus here on I don't want to be forgotten. And the primary focus of this is forgotten for the time that we shared, as if there's nothing else to remember this person for. Now, there is an accusatory element to this as well. Verse 3 says, "What's the cost of your love? You say we haven't changed at all, but you no longer know me. You don't say a thing, and you told me something like this slowly dies and fades, but what if we don't let it? I know we'll regret this. We're burning down something beautiful." There's an opportunity here to coerce the other person to change their mind, to tell them they are making a huge mistake. This feels desperate, but I think when we take into account the chorus of not wanting to be forgotten, the desperation makes sense. It does still feel extreme, particularly me coming up on my 40s. If somebody said the relationship's over, yeah, I might try to fight for it a little bit, but try to explain to the other person that we're burning down something beautiful and they're going to regret it feels extreme to me. But it feels right on par to 18-year-old me, to 20-year-old me. And I get where they're coming from. Relationships feel larger when you're younger. But verse 5 brings in the accusations even more. It says, was it even worth it? All of the blood that we bled, all of the tears that we shed for this relationship, what was the point of all of it? Why are you leaving all this behind? We put so much effort into this. We put so much energy and time and ourselves into this relationship, and you're just walking away? Our narrator doesn't have any way to contextualize this. They have to wonder what all of this time was for if it led to nothing. They're very much about the destination and not the journey. Sometimes people walk into our lives to be with us for that moment, to leave later. And in that moment, we can grow and change and become better due to having spent time with this person. That them leaving, or that us leaving, that the end of this relationship is not the end of growth, and it doesn't mean the time was wasted, but to a young person, it can. And even to an older person, there's certainly an idea, sunk cost fallacy. So much time and effort was put into this, and it led us nowhere. What was the point of all of it all along? You can certainly miss the forest for the trees here. And our narrator seems to be doing that in a very romantic, hopeless romantic kind of way. I still think it's interesting that as much as they understand the other person doesn't want to be with them, that they say in the afterlife, I hope we fall in love once again, as if death will reset the other person's mind or possibly give them perspective that they don't have now. It is a little undermining of the other person's autonomy in all of this, but I think ultimately it comes from a good place. I think the further I get from my teenage years, the more awkward emo lyrics kind of get. I still have a soft spot for these types of darkly romantic tracks, usually about breakups and confessions of love here, now, after the fact. Something about it resonates with me stupidly, still 40 years into my life, but I can also see the cracks in the writing too. And it's interesting. When I listen to true classic, primarily pop emo, because I didn't really get into classic emo stuff, but when I get into stuff like that, I'm just repeating a lot of the words. I get the vibes. I know what the songs are about, but I don't scrutinize them. These are songs that I could sing in my sleep. These are songs where the lyrics pop up in my head all the time. I'm not actively thinking about the words. I just know what they're generally about. And it's interesting to really dive into this, and I'm curious if I would dive into some of classic stuff, if I would also have this split reaction to them. Still having nostalgia for this, both the era and the age. Being a teenager is not something I'd ever want to go back to, but there is a romantic view of it. But also pairing that with how the lyrics just don't always click anymore. There's definitely a one-sided perspective to them. All right. Next up, we have what I think is the shortest one on the album. How Far? Barely 2 minutes long. Let's see what's going on here. All right. Interesting track here, primarily in relationship to the previous two. This one feels a bit more, I don't know, metallic hardcore, classic metalcore, you know, but also maybe even a little crust punk. It is incredibly focused. There is an A section in here. I think you can argue that there is an A and a B, and that the last 40 seconds have a slightly different groove to the first, but there is actually a lot of crossover in like core rhythmic and melodic elements there, that I would actually call it an iteration of the A section. And when we look at this track through iteration, we'll actually find quite a bit of it. The beginning starts one way, and then we add an extra element into it, then an extra element, then we change the rhythm at the bottom just slightly. We remove one of those elements and add another. It is a gradual evolution of a single idea. It is completely linear, but not through wide sweeping changes of A section, B section, C section, D section, like a prog metal track might be. It is subtle variation over the course of 2 minutes. We get to the end of the track by way of making small changes that we can piece back to the beginning. It makes sense where we got to, even though it is a little bit different in feel than how we started, but we can clearly see the thread. We can look at the breadcrumbs and see how we got here. That's very interesting. It's a completely different approach than what we've seen in the other two tracks, which primarily look at similar atmospheres across the song, but clearly separated verse and chorus segments. We still do have some sort of minor structure here, though, because there is a transition moment in the middle of this track that clearly removes us from the opening to the ending. And so I think that that connector there kind of makes it easier to cut this into two parts, but I still think that even within the framework of that, it's clear to see that we got to that connector and to the ending through variation. And I think that's very cool. This album continues to surprise me. It is not just one thing, despite very clearly being a post-hardcore album. And the end of this track is very post-hardcore. We shift a little bit away from that more metallic hardcore feeling that we started at the beginning of the track. Bit more on the crust punk side of things, then veering into post-hardcore. It is a cool transition that happens in conversation with the song itself. There is no jarring change in here. Everything makes sense through the concept of growth. On the other side of things, this is just incredibly aggressive and heavy. There's practically no riffage going on in here. It's all textured, it's all rhythm. There are some pitch-based riffs. This is what I was talking about earlier with a similarity in melodic elements. Notice I didn't say melody. You can kind of see how the riffs evolve into each other, but for the most part, we are looking at texture and rhythm. The texture of this is gritty. It is noisy. There is a lot of squealing of the guitars. There's high-pitched chirping of the guitars. The vocals are consistently screamed. We have layered vocals here, but not clean and harsh. They're all harsh all the time. And the end of the track with the harshes overlapping to the sides and center and sometimes doing call and response, sometimes overlapping on each other, it becomes incredibly abrasive. And I think that is ultimately the best word to describe this track is short, well, is abrasive. And I would describe it as short, evolving, and abrasive. That is the entirety of this track here. Yeah, and linear, which is cool too. We kind of saw some of that linearity from track 1 that we didn't see too much of on track 2, brought here into a purer form, almost no cyclicality. Actually, there is no cyclicality to this. This is pure linear evolution across 122 seconds. Very interesting to see where this album goes because it continues to do things that I wouldn't expect. Lyrics. Comical that just last analysis I mentioned that we're probably looking at a lot of relationship and maybe even love-focused end of relationship tracks, very common for emo, and here we don't, which probably matches the musical shift as well. We have somebody holding another person over an edge. Says that you're head over heels looking over the edge. How far will you fall? And when your body breaks, know that this is all that you wanted. So throw your wish down the well. You'll have a story to tell about your selfish body and how it felt when you fell. The sound of your yells, screaming for help. So don't look up now. How far till you're shaking hands with pavement? Our narrator is not in love, in distress, or in pain this time around. They are enacting a type of judgment. Now, for what? I'm not sure. Without the context, it's difficult to judge what this song is trying to say and how it's trying to portray our narrator. But they do have somebody in a precarious position ready to send them to their death by dropping them from a very high place. There is 2 lines here that I think allude to something, but I'm not quite sure. One says, I'm sure he can't wait to meet you, been on his mind for a while. The other says that you'll have a story to tell about your selfish body. Given the relationship stories that we've seen so far and the betrayal element from track 1, both of those themes are on my mind, and I wonder if this is a track about someone who has been cheated on. I don't think the language used here necessarily paints our narrator in a kind light to begin with, even if it is from that perspective, but it does shed a little bit of positivity towards how I view the narrator, or I guess more specifically, how the song wants me to view the narrator. That they are getting justice for being betrayed. There is a third party here that wants to meet the person who is being dangled over the edge, and our narrator accuses this person of being selfish with their body. But that still doesn't paint a very good picture here. So I don't really know what's going on. But we have a narrator that I'm not rooting for. And given the cracks in the narrator's perspective in the last couple of lines, last couple of songs, I don't know if I'm supposed to root for the narrator in any of these. Like I mentioned, I do think that a younger version of me would feel totally justified in supporting this guy. He's been wronged. He has every right to get his revenge, and death is acceptable for that because love and relationships are the ultimate thing and they mean everything in the world. Yeah, I mean, there is an extremity to this that's kind of pulpy, that I think appeals to a sort of more animalistic part of our brain, something that I think young teenage boys typically focus on or can focus on, but is, from a fictional perspective, is fun to explore. I mean, I'm 40 and I still love stupid action films. Okay, sometimes a good revenge film is just really fun to get into. But the thing here is that it crosses a line because a revenge film needs you to sympathize with the narrator, which means it needs to show you the inciting incident to really get you on their side, to support their actions, to make their violence feel justified. And I don't think I'm getting that here. I'm just seeing the final moments of this revenge tour, not what led to it. And without that context, I can't justify this violence. And this is really interesting because this could be just entirely flawed. Where maybe they want me to align myself with him because this is a revenge story and you should just get it. But I wonder too if maybe the purpose of this album isn't to be completely on board with all of the narrators. As I've said, I'm kind of torn on the last two tracks, and maybe this is a point of this album to create flawed narrators who it's kind of tough to completely support despite being empathetic towards. Something that we saw on the very opening track here is a love-hate relationship, of feeling pain towards someone's actions, but still wanting to support and be with them. Maybe this conflict is the general thesis for this album. It is called, though, You Look Good in Red, and from a very gothy and emo perspective, red typically is not the color of the clothes, but usually blood, as is, I think, highlighted by the way the album cover is painted here, the way that the red is used against a body laying on the ground. Maybe it's not quite as nuanced as I want it to be. Maybe it is just a bit more simple, which makes it difficult for me to enjoy as much as I would like to. With that said, let's get into our next one here. Falling Apart. This is, I believe, what we checked out on the live stream. another 3/4 section where the 3 has an elevation to it. We slam back down to the 1. Oh yeah, this is the one. I remember why I enjoyed this. The production on this is different than the other tracks though. A little bit of intonation things going on here. Interesting, it uses the 3/4 pulse that we had seen in a prior track while featuring the high and low contrast from Lie to Me. A really extended bridge there. Long time before coming back to this chorus. Yeah, pretty much what my same experience listening to it last month. I really enjoy this. It is interesting listening to it in context of everything else. I feel like it is the most measured track so far. Every other song has primarily focused on one specific idea. We might have some deviation from that, like at the end of Lie to Me, bringing the energy down a little bit for a moment before finding a midpoint between the highest and lowest points. But they've been focused in a way that this one isn't. This one has highs, it has lows, it has driven moments, it has introspective and vulnerable moments. It is a little all over the place while giving us a little touch of everything. We do have the harshes in here. We have some sections that isolate the harshes. We have the call and response. We have the layering on them, but we also have more clean vocal focus than any other track. And we also see some lighter guitar work in here, primarily in the verse, which gives us a new guitar tone that we haven't heard elsewhere on the album. I think as far as finding a track to introduce someone to, so far this is the best one I've heard, and certainly supports why it was chosen for live stream. I think, again, it's a measured one. It captures a lot of essences and gives all of them an adequate amount of time to be explored. Whereas other tracks focus on one aspect of what the band does. From that perspective, I really enjoy it, and I love the extra focus on clean vocals on this one over the past few tracks, where they've sort of been complementary to the harshes, or something to put in momentarily to bring the energy down, but not something to focus on entirely, such as we see in this track, where the verses are pretty much entirely cleans and they're given 50-50 lead in the choruses too. And in fact, maybe it's not a perfect 50% divide. Maybe the cleans actually have more presence in the choruses as well. And then we have the entire bridge that is clean. So more melody in this track than others, while the instrumentation continues to do what they do best. They're crafting atmosphere. They're crafting energy. This is a heavy, moody track. It's also one that focuses primarily on textures and rhythms. Lie to Me had some arpeggiation going on in it, giving us some more melodic related riffs that we don't really see too often on here. We haven't seen in a few tracks, actually. This is a song that pretty much uses the breakdown format for the entirety of it. Most of this track is based around the dun 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 rhythm within the 3/4 time signature, and it sticks with just 1 or 2 notes and allows the texture of the instruments and this rhythm itself to create the heavy weight of pushing through this song. The drum work in here is less dynamic than what we saw on the last track, and my god, it was wonderful. Bit more straightforward and punky, focusing on aggression and timekeeping with some fills to push the song forward, instead of focusing on some of the hi-hat and cymbal related stuff we had seen earlier. But I think for this song in particular, it really focuses on the vocals, and particularly the clean vocals, and feeling the emotion of them, carving the space for them to come through and tell their story. And I think that's how this song ends up being focused and how it is supposed to be understood. I think it's interesting that this album kind of fluctuates between the two of these. I do expect more often to hear this more atmospheric side of things, with a texture and rhythmic focus, not too much on the composition as much as the vocal work or maybe even the story. But I do like how we are going to get some tracks, maybe a few more, where there is a bit more of a complex writing arc to them, or something a bit softer and more measured, more nuanced, like this track, bringing the energy down and exploring different ideas. Is there anything else I wanted to bring up on this one? I don't think so. Let's hit some lyrics. And here we have the end of a relationship. This time, though, our narrator is pushing away from the other, as the other person has changed in a way that our narrator doesn't recognize anymore. The chorus states, "You're breaking my heart, and I don't think I'll ever know if I'll make it home, because you've changed and I no longer recognize you anymore." Verse 2 says, "The knife only cuts as deep as you push it. I'm begging, lover, put it down. You ruined this moment, we're both crying now. I miss when you were sober, I miss when you were mine." This idea that the other person has changed and the relationship no longer feels positive to our narrator anymore. In fact, it feels toxic and even dangerous, as we have the metaphor of the other person holding a knife over them, and our narrator asking them to put it down, that this doesn't need to continue, that any pain involved in this relationship is caused exclusively by you, not by me. The post-chorus says, "Why do you do this? You knew it would hurt me. You don't need to do this. This isn't worth it. I'm begging." So far, it's not my favorite track. Musically, I think it's the one I've enjoyed the most here, but lyrically, it's just not quite cutting it. I think that once again, it's very one-sided. It paints a perspective on our narrator that we're supposed to sympathize with, but I am not. And I think the bridge is kind of why. There is a line at the end of the verse 2 that I mentioned, "I miss when you were sober, I miss when you were mine." It doesn't mention that there is any infidelity going on here. So the only way I can read this is that you now belong to yourself or to the alcohol, drugs, whatever substance is making you not sober these days. But there's this ownership element and the idea of, you're mine, right? That's just classic Valentine's Day, read it on a card or a little candy heart thing. There's nothing to read into that as far as ownership goes. But the bridge kind of paints a different picture for me. And it's not necessarily what it says, but what it doesn't say. The bridge wonders if in a different time, maybe this could have worked out. It says maybe we were happy the way that we wanted to be. Maybe our loves align and your heart is still mine. Maybe we're married. Maybe. I hope that your smile stays the exact same way. You were so pretty. Do you think you'll still laugh at my jokes and everything will feel okay the way that it used to? The way that it was meant to be, but not here. Here you don't belong to me. Everything about this is how the other person relates to our narrator, the type of happiness that they bring to them, the feeling of owning this, not necessarily the other person, but at least the relationship, a place where they belong to our narrator, that they laugh at our narrator's jokes. Our narrator is, they feel better about themselves. They have more confidence because this other person laughs at their jokes. There is absolutely nothing in this that tells what the other person is getting out of this. In fact, the only thing about the other person, it isn't about their happiness. It isn't about what they get out of it. The only comment he makes about them is that they would be pretty like they were. The only element of the other person, the only characteristic about them that our narrator brings up at all is their beauty. It doesn't say that maybe in another time you wouldn't have abused substances. Maybe another time you would be sober more often and you could pursue your goals, but it never comes across the narrator's mind. Everything is focused and framed around the narrator's wants and needs and the way that they can feel better about themselves and validated within their own life. That is the only way that the other person is contextualized in this story. It doesn't tell us why they might have turned to drugs or alcohol. It doesn't tell us why they're not sober, why they're acting the way they are. There is no feeling in here at all about the other person. This song is simply, I was happy. Now I'm not happy because of what you've done. And we got to end this. Maybe it's justified. Maybe this other person just spiraling. Their life is a mess and, finally for whatever reason the narrator's seeing it. But maybe this is a mental health crisis. Maybe they're dealing with depression. Maybe they just lost a parent. and they've turned to alcohol to deal with it, which isn't healthy. And the time that you would really need someone to be the rock in your corner, they're not. Now, granted, there is at least a figurative language of violence in here. Yeah, sure, okay. There's certainly a self-preservation angle for our narrator, but the fact that they don't talk anything, and this is consistent across the album so far, it's never about the other person, it's about what they represent to our narrator, which is a cornerstone of emo music in general. I get that. But like I mentioned two analyses ago, it's interesting to reflect on these types of themes that I do recognize in music I love, but don't really focus on too much because I don't scrutinize the lyrics as deeply. I'm not going to go any further into it, but I needed to say that. And even if I don't bring it up again, maybe I'll just kind of nudge towards it. Here's another song where it's just about the narrator. But I'm not going to try to dig into it anymore because it is a trapping of the genre. It's also a trapping of teenagers and young 20-somethings writing romance lyrics in a darker angle because they've got to be emo. Like, trust me, dude, I wrote lyrics like this when I was 19. I listened to music like this when I was 19 and really identified with the lyrics. I get it. I've been in this headspace before. I wish I had somebody who could have told me it wasn't healthy. I've said this many times on the channel, but I could very definitely be a different person today than I am. I was a gatekeeper, and I could have gone down some very different ideological pipelines if I hadn't have found some really good information and leaders and people who could guide me through elements of my life and help me see beyond my own horizon. I don't know where I'm going with this. The problem with doing this off the cuff, but I do see a lot of myself in this, my younger self, half my age self in this album. And it's interesting to reflect on that reflection and see, one, how much I've grown, but two, how much I still enjoy this. Even if I don't agree with it, I still find a lot of nostalgia and enjoyment out of this musical sound. Even the lyrics still kind of, they hit a spot in my brain where I've held similar lyrics for decades of my life. I just want to kind of make it clear here that while I am talking about the lyrics that Love Letter has written, I'm also kind of talking about a lot of lyrics as a whole and also my past. A lot of this video, I feel like, is for me. Probably more than y'all. I don't know how much musical analysis we're really going to get out of this, especially since I think I've mostly hit on the core ideas this band is probably going to focus on lyrically and musically across the album. We are a third of the way done. I'm not expecting a lot of change from what we've heard so far. But hopefully you can go on this journey with me. Maybe you'll explore some of your past. Maybe all of this is completely foreign to you and you are a newcomer in emo lands. and you can enjoy that ride. The next one up is called Burn, Pine, Die, Perish. Interesting. Oh, I meant to bring up the intonation last time too. More dissonant on this track. Oh, okay. Riffier on this track than previously. Okay, Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. A little retardando into something a bit sludgy. Also a shift to 3. Oh, okay, so it is constant 3. I thought I heard a shift. Okay. Yeah, I want to bring up the concept of noise and dissonance. We haven't really heard too much of it. We don't have panic chords going on in here. We haven't really had a lot of dissonant elements, but I did notice in the last track in Falling Apart, in one of the calmer sections, probably the second verse, that there is a moment when the guitar is playing a melody and the notes just aren't perfect. I don't know if the guitarist is playing the notes just a hair bit flat or sharp, or if maybe the strings aren't quite tuned perfectly in tune with each other, but there's a bit of warble, a bit of dissonance in the interval layering that we have going on there. I think that was the first time I heard that though, so I wonder if that was purposefully done in that track. Here though, we focus on dissonance heavily. This is a track that feels like it's in conversation with the track before it. Also, I meant to bring this up too. The idea that the songs are in conversation with each other. So track 3, How Far, was about dropping someone and seeing how far they would fall. Track 4 opens with the line, slow, your feathers fall from the balcony. We have this concept of falling here. Again, the dissonance slowly introduced in parts of track 4 bring about more dissonance in track 5. I really want to ascribe intention to this, but usually track listing is one of the last things you do. You write all your songs and you figure out how you want them to flow. I think one of the few cases where this doesn't happen is concept albums, where you have a story you want to tell. So the order of your songs is kind of already determined by the story itself. But otherwise, for something like this, it's not necessary that they're purposefully putting these in this order, but I do think it's interesting to see this progression. Falling Apart also carries stylistic ideas from Lie to Me and My God. It was wonderful listening to the two of those in the extremities that they focus on and then pairing them together for this composite view within Falling Apart. I think is very cool. Do I think all of this was intentional? No. Like I said, track listing, it's not an exact science. It's one of the last things you figure out. And usually things like this are going to be more coincidental than anything else. But I do think it's cool that this journey kind of works the way that it does. I think as far as lyrics go, it's more just about falling being a common idea throughout all of these, since most of this is about the death of a relationship. We have negativity built into common themes. We have common topics on all of these tracks. The vocabulary is going to have overlaps. But I do think it's cool that we can make these connections and kind of see this progression through an album that is probably a bunch of isolated tracks written without context of others. Simply just getting 12 songs together. But we do have the dissonance in here, and we heard a lot of it towards the end of the track as we focused on tremolo playing and random note selection in those final moments. I don't know what to make of that. It's just, here's dissonance where it really hasn't been prior. So otherwise, we have another song that focuses around the 3 as we get towards the end of the track. There's a 4 focus at the beginning of the track. Every time we get to a 3, there seems to be this idea of 1 and 2 being heavy and 3 being elevation. I don't know why they keep doing this. It's just their language. It's the way they musically speak. And it's a cool idea. I really liked it in My God, It Was Wonderful. It was cool in How Far. Here it is again. I don't know if it's going to continue to be super cool for me, but I think that it's fresh right now. And what I ascribed earlier as intention of pairing theme with music, I'm starting to see as more of a trope of their style than something that they might purposefully be creating to tie lyrical and musical themes together. Otherwise, this is just a solid track right here. I don't think there was anything in here that really stood out to me. It feels like a continuation of the style of music they have been playing. Let's hit some lyrics. Here we have another track that I feel is trying to say something, but is a little lost in how it's trying to say it. There is a feeling here of being controlled and breaking through, a theme of resistance, possibly. Much like How Far, it seems we're deviating from the romantic elements of the album and looking at something else. The end says, I'm not coming back. Surrender's not an option, and this means war. Race like rats, we all fed into a line, move like cattle, one step at a time. Revolution called for change, the lights fired red. The final lines say, I'd rather die than be tamed. Every beat is like bullets they'll never understand. There goes everything I ever had, everything I ever wanted. Regulator. This feeling that there is something controlling our narrator, and that they would rather die than be controlled by that force. That force is described as having visions, goals. Possibly our narrator says that they played along, but did things actually get better? So he says, I refuse to lay down and go along with this, but also says that I played along with this. At the beginning of the track, it says, I've been dying to feel you. I've been trying to help you help yourself. But get away from everything. I drank from the grail and raised my glass. I hid behind perjury, smoke, and mirrors. This, I think, is really interesting because the first track is feeling betrayed by someone else because they lied to him. Here we have a song about someone hiding within lies themselves. Now, I'm not going to try to say that the protagonist of all of these stories are the same. I assume this is all isolated ideas, and we're not looking at a concept album at all. But I am trying to figure out what the album is trying to say. There is a very clear, at least so far, half of the album that is focused on the death of romance and the pain that goes along with that. It's an emo album. You're gonna get heartbreak songs. That's the genre. But the other half, I'm really trying to figure out where it stands. This track sits in opposition to the first one, which says lying to feels bad. And this one says I sat within lies and that was fine. But this one also says I refuse to help people who sit inside lies and who want to control others. And it also says that I helped you and I want to help. And I don't understand what it's trying to say. It talks to, I mean, maybe it's somebody who has tried to go with the flow and that didn't work. And now they're pushing to be a resistance towards the flow. Maybe. But then we have the title, which shows up in the middle and is heavily emphasized: burn, pine, die, perish. Pine immediately makes me think of trees. Burning fits with that well, but what if we were talking about pining after someone or something, wanting it? Burn, die, and perish, they're all kind of the same thing. It's about the death of something. But pining feels separate from that. I'm not sure what that means. I'm lost on this. I'm trying not to view it negatively as something that is inadequately attempting to portray its thoughts. As usual, I'm going to take the brunt of this and say that I'm just having a problem interpreting it. I would love for other people to weigh in on this one, though. Maybe there is something to be said here and I'm missing a very key line that would open everything up for me and make me understand it. But maybe it also is just kind of confused. I mean, it wouldn't be the first track on this album that I felt has had mixed messaging. Next up we have With Everything in My Heart. I think we're going back to a relationship track. Oh, see, there's some nice clarity to the bass. The guitar is also incredibly treble focused here, leaving a lot of room for the bass. I like the production on this. Even the drums aren't as powerful as they've been in the past. Yeah. Acoustic guitar, layered cleans. A balanced mix. Why can't we have more of this? Is that ornamental synthesizer? Okay. Noise again, though. That's my favorite so far. That one right there. Oh, that one ran right up to the last second, too. Yeah, dude, easy win so far. It takes the idea of Falling Apart, which is the more measured composition that kind of takes every aspect of this band and pulls it together into one idea. This is heavy and textured and groovy, but it's also light and vulnerable and layered and balanced. And it finds the room between both of them. It's layered and chaotic. We have that metallic hardcore ending. I think this is the second or third track to do a retardando into a slower, heavier finale. So that's an interesting pattern to see. But what I think is most clear on this track is there is a vision for clarity in the mix. And I wonder why now. My gut tells me this is probably one of the last ones recorded or maybe even produced, that the experience of recording the others, of producing the other tracks, has led to something of more experience and more understanding of how to create something more balanced for this song, that everything has accumulated to this point. And there's always financials, because I was going to follow that with, and I don't know why they didn't apply this knowledge to everything else. But, you know, financials come into play. You've got to pay your producer, your engineer, your mixer. So, you know, there's got to be a point when, in any art project, regardless of medium, there's a point where you say, that's enough. That's where I have to stop the small changes. Because otherwise, you're going to be here forever. There's no way of creating a perfect song. I don't remember the exact phrase that I've always heard over the years, but the general idea is like the first 90% takes up half of the creation time, and the final 10% takes the other half of the creation time. Something along those ideas, that it just takes forever to fix all the small things. And as you fix all that, you have more experience, more knowledge, you can go back and do it. And that's the thing, you can always go back and fix something else. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And so you just got to have a stopping point. This is good enough. This is where the work of art, the painting, the music, the sculpture, the video game, the film, whatever, like you're done with it. You're releasing out to the public, blemishes and all. For the most part, the artist is the only one going to see most of the imperfections anyways once you get to that level. But still, you ask any artist and they're going to tell you there was something else they could have done. And so there's a point where some of these, well, see, here's the interesting thing though. I don't see this too often. Maybe it's because we primarily look at larger bands who can hire established engineers who maybe aren't producing it themselves. That's something I haven't even thought about yet. What if this is all self-produced? What if they learned production on the fly while making this album? Certainly, if you look at my works from the last 2 years or so, you're going to see a drastic change in production. I had never produced anything prior to like 2 or 3 years ago. And so my production skills were totally empty. And if you listen to some of the newest stuff I've done, there's a lot of clarity to it. There's a lot of cool production stuff. There's some electronic techniques going on in there with transitions and filters and modulation. I've picked up a lot. What if I put the last 12 songs I ever made onto an album? There's going to be a massive variety of production quality going on that album. And maybe that's what happens here. But I find it really interesting to pair this against Falling Apart, which I think has the worst balanced EQ so far, with the clean vocals being way too quiet and the snare, I think, even being louder than it was on Lie to Me. That was a song that felt too compressed, too leveled out, where everything's kind of flat. And the mix of the instruments is that some are just too quiet, even though they're supposed to be lead elements. Whereas you get something like this and it's airy, there's spaciousness to it. You can hear everything. The muddiness I was talking about in the bass isn't really here. It's still a wide, reverberant bass tone, but they found a way to bring out the accents, the attacks themselves, so that you can hear each individual hit. It still fills out the low end really well without giving up readability. The snare is still open and it has that loud crack, but it's mixed well. It's not too loud in the mix. The vocal layering is all fantastic on this. This is a perfectly mixed track. It's really interesting that we get this here in the middle. And initially I thought, oh, it's because, the verse is pretty quiet. It's very mellow. We have acoustic guitar here that we haven't had before. It's a pretty light sound, but we enter into the chorus and the outro, and they're heavy and layered and dense and compressed and distorted, just like any other part of this album. And the production on those focuses on clarity without removing any of the filthiness, the grit that you want in this kind of music. It balances it. It moves from an album that I'd probably describe so far as something revolving around a mid-fi production that sometimes leans lo-fi into some solid quality mid to high fidelity production. I really enjoy this track, and the production is a big part of it. But I also feel like, much like Falling Apart, there's a measured approach to composition here. This isn't a song that focuses on any one thing, but embodies everything. We do have lighter, mellow sections. We do have a focus on clean vocals over harshes. We do have a balance between highs and lows. We have structural phrasing throughout this. We have momentum. We have rising and falling action. This feels like a song that just a little bit more, I don't want to say effort, but more experience was had before creating it. I would be very surprised to find out that this would be one of their earliest songs written or produced, because so far this track feels like a culmination of the experience of making so many other songs. And it captures a little bit of everything and ties it together. I still think Falling Apart is a solid introduction track, but given the probably roughest production on the album, this is the one I would probably show people first, despite the verse being kind of super mellow. It doesn't give you a really good idea of a track like Burn, Pine, Die, Perish, or How Far, ones that focus primarily on heaviness and weight and grit and aggression. We don't get the extremity of that on this track, but we do get something that pushes towards that direction. I think this song, more than anything, has me excited for a follow-up album. Something that might be a little bit more balanced across the board, might have a unified identity as far as production goes, and would be a culmination of what they learned on this album, packaged up into a follow-up. It's really interesting to see this, though. Like I said earlier, it's rare to find an album so varied with quality like this. Not compositional quality, but the way it's all packaged together for the listener. I also think that the vocal lines here are some of the most interesting that we have as far as layered vocal work goes. It's not call and response. It's pure counterpoint, but it's also unbalanced counterpoint. At one point, the harsh vocals probably get out 16 or 17 words, and the time the clean gets like 6 or 7. And this is just because the harsh vocals are more focused on a quicker delivery of syllables, focusing on staccato notes, whereas the clean vocals are focused on holding notes out, something more legato. But the harsh vocalist also gets their line finished like 4 bars before the cleans do. And so we get this isolation of clean at the end of every phrase. I think this is really interesting because it creates a lack of symmetry between the two. In the past, we've had call and response. We've had layered where they're saying the same exact thing. We've had songs where the clean sings everything and the harshes come in for specific words or phrase to provide emphasis on those specific words. Maybe they mean something really important and the band wants you to know, these words are where it's at. They're going to give you the most understanding here, so we're going to emphasize them for you. Sort of like how some people will repeat for emphasis. Repeat for emphasis. But I don't think we've seen anything like this that's asymmetric, where the two vocal parts have different weighting to them, where they feel like proper counterpoint, not based and dependent around each other, but two separate ideas that happen to function well simultaneously. And to me, again, this feels like an evolution of writing. I really enjoyed that part. We also have a sick bass line in here that we've heard some bass lines in the past that sort of allude towards a more melodic take on bass work. And this says, you know what? Put the camera on them, put the mic on them. They are going to be the instrument here, and they get to pull these phenomenal lead lines out. Very cool stuff. We have some neat ornamental ideas. We have an electronic sound that part of me thinks synthesizer, but also theremin. I kind of felt a little bit of that, the smoothness of pitch change in that, I mean, could be theremin, could also just be a mod wheel or a pitch wheel on a keyboard as well. Regardless, we haven't heard anything electronic on this album at all, so that was kind of neat. We had the acoustic guitar in here. There's just a lot of timbral variety on this. The sonic palette they're working with has expanded beyond 4 colors to like 7 or 8 here. And when we see the production improving, the composition becoming more complex, using more instrumentation, this just really feels like growth to me. This is a maturation, which I find, again, really interesting. It's not something I expect to hear within an album. Usually it's maturation between albums, where one album feels more experienced or more mature than the previous one because they have experience that they have gained from making the previous album they can apply to the next one. You don't really hear that within an album, but this song is just head over shoulder. Is that the phrase? Anyways, it's just completely, clearly more delicately written with more nuance than anything else we've listened to, without removing any of its intensity. The heavy sections are still heavy, they're still gritty, they're still gnarly. The ending of the track is still massive. They didn't give any of that up. They just found a way to explore the spaces deeper. I don't want to say better because it implies that complex is better than simplistic, but they do find more depth in this track than they have previously. Let's hit some lyrics. Here we have the end of a relationship. Opening verse, choking, but I tie my own knots because I can take the pain. Because I adore you, but do I bore you? There's no passion behind your eyes. I can't keep on doing this. Once again, a relationship where our narrator isn't happy and wants to leave. I find it interesting, this is our second one of these, and yet there's no compassion or understanding in the situations where the songs are about someone wanting to leave our narrator. Anyways, the chorus is the back and forth between the harsh and, not back and forth, but the layered, harsh, and clean vocals. One says, you say it's better this way, but it's harder to breathe when you're not around. The other one says, tell me what you want from me. I promise I'll do anything you always used to say to be someone who would change for me. The idea here is that the other person wants our narrator to be whatever is necessary at the moment, and our narrator, somebody who generally wanted to be that or ended up being that, but at this point can no longer sacrifice their own happiness for the happiness of someone else. Calls it a desperate execution, but that they're still hanging on despite the relationship already being dead, but they swear that they'll make it different and they'll change and they'll fix this. Maybe someday I'll be who you need me to be, and maybe someday you'll understand. The second verse continues on with the idea that the relationship is dead and that the person is in pain, that this environment is toxic for them. And then we return back to the chorus, and that's the entirety of the song. Another pretty straightforward track about a relationship being over. This next one is called I Will Sing For You, Will You Ever Know? Which sounds like we're entering into unrequited love territory, which is another staple of emo music. Oh, that's the next track. This one's See You Tomorrow. The layering on the vocals also drastically increases the vocals on it. A little bit of that tension in there, introducing a bit of darkness into the track. Alongside Optimism, Unfounded Optimism. Hello. Vocal intonation. Very Nirvana for a second, just engaging in total disruptive harmonic ideas. Hear the bass kick over there? All right, a couple of new things here. This one's a bit grungier. There's a focus on pretty straightforward harmonic movements. Bum bum ba da bum 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 ba 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 bum bum ba da ba bum. Those aren't the right notes. I'm not a vocalist. I don't know what notes I'm singing. But the idea is you pick a chord, you play a root tone, you might have a couple of moving lines as you move to the next chord, and then you stick on a note for a rhythmic element to it. Very Nirvana. We have some gritty cleans on this track. Again, very Nirvana. And the beginning of the second verse reminded me of, I'll put it up there, editor Bryan can take care of it. There is a Nirvana song we checked out a while ago where they basically made sure that nobody was ever playing in tune in specific parts of the song and really focused on noise, dissonant noise. But the dissonance is sort of a secondary component to the fact that people are just kind of playing whatever they want. We saw that type of approach here where, yes, harmonically we are looking at unstable note intervals, but primarily we're just looking at a lot of clashing sounds simultaneously and pairing that with the vocalist purposefully singing a bit out of tune, a little bit flat on most of the notes. Also reminds me of Kurt Cobain's vocals in that Nirvana song. So overall, I feel like where we do have a very post-hardcore perspective and foundation for most of this album that kind of sometimes pushes into melodic hardcore, this one is heavily influenced by grunge. It's also, I think, the most dissonant song we've heard, even if it was just a small portion of that verse. I don't think any other portion of any song has really pushed into harmonic instability that far. And I find that really interesting because it's in the middle of a track that playfully nudges at harmonic instability, but doesn't really dive fully into it. There are a couple of places where I feel like the guitar is purposefully detuned on a couple of strings in order to add tension where normally it wouldn't be, but not purposeful tension where we're looking at maybe a half step interval or a chord where one of the notes doesn't fit. It's more so that there's a slight bit of intonation issues going on where one note is a hair bit flatter or sharper than it should be, and otherwise this should be a fairly stable chord, and here it isn't. So I find that kind of interesting. But the other aspect I think that shows up here that separates this quite a bit is something I already brought up, which is the vocal work. This feels somehow angrier. And it's actually because of the lack of harsh vocals on this one. We don't have screams. We do have compressed cleans, adding a little bit of grit to traditional vocal cord singing. For whatever reason, that comes across as more aggressive than the harshes, and it may be its absence so far on this album, that its presence here is a contrast that elevates it. But it might also be that I'm hearing, instead of cleans or harshes, I hear cleans becoming harshes, parts of a clean line that have more grits in them, as if that part of the sentence saying that word, coming to this specific idea, causes the vocalist to push through. Emotions are coming through the performance rather than carefully selected sounds to portray emotions within a performance. There is something about these that, despite the harshes clearly being a fairly raw type of fry scream, they're also very calculated in a way that these don't feel, though they probably are still quite calculated. And that part of the performance makes this feel more raw, makes it feel more relatable. It makes it feel more real. And that barrier being blurred between, is this music or is this someone legitimately getting upset while singing this, begins to blur a bit. That line is not as clear as it has been in other tracks. And I think that adds to the aggression of it. It feels like I'm watching something real or listening to something real rather than listening to something calculated. It's interesting that it's not used anywhere else on the album. I would actually find that having all three vocal types present in other songs would elevate them. And yet it's so far just been relegated to this one song where we don't have harsh vocals at all. Otherwise, emotionally, this track features some positivity, a type of optimism throughout. It is still a heavy focused track, but there is some extra treble that is showcased in the guitar mixing and EQing. And that paired with the chord progressions introduce a feeling of positivity for the future and optimism, but it is often paired with or juxtaposed against noise and dissonance and chaos, as if these plans are being destroyed or this optimism isn't well placed and that they're going to be disappointed by what the future holds compared to what their expectations are for it. That's what I'm getting out of the musical side of things anyways. I think this is one of the brighter songs on the album, but simultaneously it's one of the noisiest ones as well. And I think that contrast is really interesting, and I certainly focused on it as far as atmospheric storytelling goes. Let's hit some lyrics. Once again, I extend an invitation for help in understanding this. Verse 1, you dance off to the bed so gracefully, but there's something in the dark watching me. I never wanted to break a heart so badly, but there's something in the dark whispering. So we have some feeling within our narrator that they want to end this relationship. The chorus says, I know I'm the worst, but it was beautiful. And I know it hurts, but you're beautiful. And it could be worse. I could love you too. And I know it hurts. You're just so beautiful. On the one hand, we have this idea that he's ready to end this relationship. And that the ending of this could be worse because our narrator might actually have their heart broken too, but they don't actually love this other person, which is apparent once again because the only way this other person is described at all is their looks. This is the second time out of 7 tracks that we've described anything about the other person in this relationships, and it's always their beauty. Regardless, they don't even love them. This makes sense to me. It's not a great story, admittedly, and I don't understand the line, I know it hurts, but you're so beautiful. I'm pretty sure but is a conjunction that's going to combine these two words in opposition, or these two sentences in opposition. I don't understand what one has to do with the other. I don't understand why that word is there. I don't get it. But then the post-chorus says, I want to see you tomorrow, so you better be there. Verse 2 says, don't act like you don't know how much we both hate being alone. Did you drown out all the noise? Do you remember the name I used, all the words I said when I first met you? So now we're recalling how this relationship started and how they need each other because they can't be separate. The post-chorus says, what if there's no tomorrow and I won't see you again? I'm scared I'm going to miss you when the night comes to an end. These two ideas run in complete opposition of the idea of wanting to end this relationship and knowing that he's terrible for wanting to end it. He says he doesn't even love the other person, and yet in the very next breath he says, "I would miss you if I never saw you again." I could view this as a conflicted narrator. Once again, much like some of the opening tracks, but it just feels like bad writing. It doesn't feel like the song knows what it's trying to say here. It doesn't know what it wants to say. The end says, maybe this is all I really am, and is there something wrong with that? And I don't know what this song's... I mean, maybe this is what I really... Is it that you're conflicted? Is the truth of your person that you want to hurt somebody, or that you can't be alone? Not being alone is certainly something you can work on. I don't think it makes you wrong, but it's not healthy. But if you actively take joy in wanting to break people's hearts, yes, I would say that was wrong with you, but I don't know which one are you. I'm very confused about this one. And the fact that this is the third one, this album, that I have found that I'm looking at opposing ideas, I really hope their lyric writing improves, or simultaneously that I'm told I'm wrong here and that people have found a very clear idea in these tracks. But given how clearly stated most of the other tracks are, I find it really strange that almost half of the ones we've listened to so far kind of feel conflicted in their messaging. All right, I was wrong earlier. Now we're going to check out I'll Sing For You, Will You Ever Know? Oh, very uplifting. Another one with a really meaty bass kick on the right side. A lot of tension here. Almost shifting into the realm of like a noise rock. Oh, not noise rock, like a gritty indie rock. Interesting spaciousness on the kit too. All right. This is maybe not the ballad, but it is the most mellowest track atmospherically on this album so far. And if you don't know, every emo album, and honestly even every post-hardcore album, needs an uplifting song or a low energy song somewhere towards the end of the album. I don't know why, it's just a rule. It's kind of like the old days of hair metal and maybe even heavy metal, I'm not sure, where you had to have a ballad somewhere on the album. Emo kind of follows that same thing. You can have a gnarly, aggressive album all the way through until one track that's very sappy and poppy and bright, and it feels like it doesn't belong in the album at all, and then your last couple of tracks are back to the heavy and gritty. This is something that shows up on so many post-hardcore and especially pop emo albums. And this is, it might be the closest we get to something like this. It definitely feels lighter. It has some levity to it that most of the other tracks don't. Even the lower energy songs that we've listened to, such as Falling Apart, still have a weight to them that I don't think is felt on this one. That's not to say that this is an easily digestible track, though. This is tense. And I find it really interesting that, much like See You Tomorrow, we have a song that primarily has a positive feeling. Maybe it was With Everything in My Heart. One of the last tracks we listened to has a generally positive feeling here. If you listen to the main chord progression, you listen to the arpeggiating guitar work, you listen to the vocal line, you're going to find some positivity in that, something joyful or hopeful. But alongside that, towards the end of the phrase, always brings in intonation elements that lean more towards dissonant harmony. There's a noisy factor that comes in. The post-chorus, both post-choruses, I think were instrumental parts that were harmonically completely unstable. Focusing back on some of the harmonic instability and noise and dissonance that we saw on the last track. When you pair these together, we have another song that features some type of hope or optimism clashing against noise and destruction and instability, just completely ruining the vibe of the track. And we have this tonal contrast on this song. We never really enter into a heavy moment. So many tracks on this album will devolve into a slower tempo. We use a ritardando, or a slowing down gradual of time, into a slower, heavier ending. We have seen that several times on this album. We don't have that here. We keep it light and crunchy. Like a good crisp, I suppose. It has that really cringy, crunchy tension going on in the harmonic palette, but production-wise, the tones of these instruments, the balancing of all the mixing and all that, it's a song that is fairly light. And that is the main thing I hear on this track, is just the clash between the main melody and the guitar solos, I guess we can call them. It's usually during the instrumental bits, and a guitar will come in and just play a bunch of notes that don't work with anything else and feel like some sort of harmonic wreck. It's just a clashing of a lot of sounds that don't work well, and it creates this just mess, like a scribble in the middle of a well-done drawing. That is pretty much what this song says to me. So let's, oh, and everything else is really simple. I want to add that in. The bass line, we don't have any cool moving parts. The drum part is almost all of this. Bass, kick, bass, kick, bass, kick, bass, bass, kick. It's very straightforward. The guitar works fairly straightforward, a lot of arpeggiating lines, and the vocal melody is repetitive and easy to catch on to. Very easy to hum this one. So let's hit some lyrics. I had to catch myself just now. I'm reading the lyrics, and I think I started to veer into a cynical take on it, particularly because of the way that this album has consistently pit me against the main narrator because of their viewpoints, because of the vocabulary they use, because of how they frame their thoughts and their interactions in the tracks that are about relationships. This is a song about somebody who loses a loved one. Verse 1 says, begging on the phone, saying, baby, please come home, smiling through it all, don't stay out too late. The second verse says, night turns into day, you're usually home by now, smiling through it all, you'll be back just in time. The pre-chorus and chorus, though, tell us what actually happened. You're driving down the highway, pushing in the fast lane, carving up the west coast, holding on for dear life. I could hear the crash when I heard the news. Will you ever know that I'm missing you? And I could see the blood when I close my eyes. Will you realize that I'm missing you? So this person ended up in a car crash on the highway and presumably is dead. It doesn't say that it was fatal, but the phrase, I'm missing you, kind of leans towards that direction. But the idea of will you ever know, will you realize that I'm missing you feels like validation again. The song isn't about missing someone. It's about wanting to be acknowledged that you're missing someone. And I don't know if that's necessarily a fair read, but like I said, I've been pitted at odds against our narrator this entire album, or narrators, I suppose. Each track is an isolated vignette. And here I kind of feel that same way. Am I being unfairly judgmental? But on the other hand, I don't really feel a lot of sorrow in this either. I'm told that this person misses the other person, but, well, let me give you an example here. One thing I've described emo as in the past, and to an extent post-hardcore, particularly in bands like Law Dispute that we've checked out in the past, is that there is the emotional component. It is emo, after all, stemming from emotional hardcore or emo-core. I don't feel a lot of emotion in this. I mentioned that musically, I feel like there's positivity met with clashing of disruption. And yeah, part of this song is I'm waiting for you to come home, looking forward to you coming home tomorrow. And then the clashing is the reality of the situation, that they have been in a crash and have been killed. They will not be coming home. But I don't feel sorrow in the music. I don't feel sorrow in the lyrics. I don't feel sorrow in the vocal performance. In the past, I have described emo music as being incredibly dramatic. It's one of the things that elevates it, sometimes into the realm of cheesiness or camp, but something that I have felt has been something that elevates the genre as a whole. The same thing kind of goes with Gothic music, where you just kind of push the dreariness and the darkness to such a level that you're either on board with it, you have, crossed the threshold of believability, or you find it to be too cheesy. It's really difficult to find someone in the middle of acceptance of Gothic music. And I think emo's the same way. You're either on board for this ridiculously dramatic performance, or you're not. That's missing here. And I think it's interesting that we had the vocal cracks into the compressed cleans on the last track that kind of represented anger. I think we could really have used that to push into the realm of pain that this song is missing. And without the feeling of negativity, without pain, loss, grief, anything like that, this song doesn't have any teeth. And without teeth, it feels insincere. And when we have a song that says, will you ever know that I'm missing you? Will you realize that I'm missing you, to somebody who is dead? and feeling that they're wanting validation for these emotions mixed with the insincerity, it kind of comes across as selfish. Someone who is performatively being emotional but doesn't actually care about the other person. They're not sad they're gone, but they are worrying if other people are noticing them being sad. Hey, I miss that person. Do you see me missing that person? I think I'm digging too far into this one, but I'm curious if anyone else gets that feeling too. Something about this track isn't clicking, and I think a little bit of it is atmosphere and a little bit is lyrics, and I think this could have been an incredibly emotional performance, something that was completely gut-wrenching for the listener, and instead it's just kind of meh. The song is well done, the lyrics are fine together, they don't really work that well, so it creates something that's just mid all around. But I mean, a song about someone you love thinking they'll be back after going out and then realizing on the news the next day, you don't even get to hear about it directly, you've waited hours since it happened, that they died in a car crash. This is gut-wrenching, this is heartbreaking, and yet no part of this song feels like that. I don't know. I think it's fine. Again, from a musical perspective, the music is well written. All the parts work together well. The vocals are sung well. The lyrics make sense. I'm reading them. They're not jarbled or confusing. It's just not what it could have been. And maybe that's me, once again, telling an artist how to make their art, and that's not fair to them. But I'm kind of confused what the purpose of this then is. To create a nonchalant, my girlfriend just died song or my boyfriend just died song. Why is that nonchalant? Why are these lyrics written the way they are? It's not I'm missing you. It's will you know I'm missing you? And to me, those are two very different statements with very different intentions. All right. We have two short tracks coming up. They're both about 3 minutes long, almost exactly 6 minutes together. We may run these back to back if I don't have much to say about High Risk, High Reward. That is a 180 spin. The back and forth on the harshes, nice contrast from the last track, which was single vocal focused. You know what this song reminds me of? Y'all know a band called Crypto Dira? "15-beat phrase?" Oh, not that one.
I'm breaking. My body is breaking. Lie softly, I'm breaking. Lie softly, I'm breaking. I'll take my risk. I'll take this risk. I risk.
Yeah, that's just a high energy track from start to finish. I don't think I have a lot to add to that one.
This conversation has gone on.
Oh, a little bit of darkness in there though. I expect this song to stay at this level though.
I'm losing my voice once again, and you're made of clearly isn't fucking working, but I didn't realize that would be the last time I would look you in your eyes and say I love you too. I'll digress.
I like the subtle tempo shift down for this section.
I'll cry while I'm doing my best to forget all about you. About you. About you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of darkness in here, but there's a general uplift to all of it too.
About you. About you. About you. If I begged you to
I told y'all, every emo album needs one of these, and it's always towards the end.
I'll be okay. If I hug you harder, if I kissed you harder, if I told you the truth, would I still be with you? If I begged you to stay, would it all be okay? Oh.
I think it's interesting how often we heard dead notes in there too, which is where you strum the guitar, but yeah, it's not a perfect placement on the neck. Maybe you don't have enough pressure. Maybe your wrist after you strum kind of grazes the string and stops it from vibrating, but you get like a thunk. You get the note itself, but it's abruptly stopped as the vibrations on the string are halted or incredibly diminished. Usually it's a signifier that you played incorrectly. You could have played that note more correctly. They left them all in here, and they were never in the same place, which I think is interesting too, because that signifies two things. One, it's not necessarily planned, they just kind of happened. And two, that they didn't just record the phrase once and then copy and pasted that in the workstation, that every single line in here, every single phrase, even if it was just the same four chords with the same rhythmic pattern, was recorded individually, which is very cool. But it does give it a bit of a raw feeling where it's it's almost as if, for the most, I mean, there are some sections in here with more vocal parts to it and more guitar parts, but at least when we have a single vocal and a single guitar, it's almost as if somebody just grabbed a guitar, played, and this is the 2-3 minutes of that performance, one shot take. It probably isn't. This may be spliced up of several takes in order to create the best single take, as is pretty common in all genres of music. But it still evokes that feeling that it's been treated very minimally, that there hasn't been an aim for perfection. There's been an aim for authenticity. And I think some of that comes through on the vocal line too, where some of the pitches are just a hair bit sharper or flatter than would be perfect, but ends up feeling right here because it gives it that one take vibe. I really appreciate that. This track also focuses on contrasting positive vibes with tenser, darker chords. This is pretty much the way this entire song operates, which is uplift with one chord, bring down with the next, uplift with the next chord, bring down with the one after that. And I don't know, I appreciate how all of this comes together. The imperfections in the vocals, the imperfections in the guitar performance, the shifting sense between consonance and dissonance in the harmony. I'd even say that some of the vocal rasp and just the way that the vocal coloring and timbre changes throughout, that different syllables or volumes alter the shape, tone, and coloring of the sound of the vocals themselves. Again, it gives it this feeling of untreated, as if an engineer didn't go in here and balance everything and mix everything, that this is just simply a recording, a candid recording of someone performing a very vulnerable track, just them and their guitar. And I think that works well. And I called it, there's always one song like this. Granted, this had a bit more darkness than I think I normally hear within emo albums, but still acoustic with a brightness to it. Towards the end of the album, I don't make the rules, I just deliver the message that they exist. What I find really interesting, though, is the contrast. With Everything in My Heart brings the energy down a little bit. There's the rasp in the vocals, I believe is that one. See You Tomorrow, kind of another mix. We have some highs, we have some lows. I'll Sing For You kind of enters into a lighter sound again. Then we go into High Risk, High Reward, which is all energy. This is like how far, this is metallic hardcore, this is angry, this is angsty, this is loud, this is aggressive, every moment of the song, all the way through. And then we go to acoustic. And this part of the album, I'd say like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's just swinging between extremes. I don't necessarily think an album needs to ramp up linearly, but this is bipolar. These songs are sweet and then aggressive, and then sweet and then aggressive, very rarely focusing on a middle sound. We go through extreme intensities on all of these, and I think in particular 8, 9, and 10 back to back are incredibly wild, where 8 is probably the closest to a poppy sound on this album. High Risk, High Reward is incredibly intense and is like being smacked in the face while you're still groggy coming off after track 8. And then now that you're pumped up after these 3 minutes, now we get an acoustic ballad. The next track is called I Hate Your Guts. It would not surprise me if we skyrocketed back up to 10 for that one. And the final one's Nothing Matters Anymore, which feels pretty dreary. Something tells me we're going to go back to a midpoint or a low point for that one. This is a wild back end of an album. And I'm not sure what the goal is with this, but if the whiplash is what they're intending, they have absolutely nailed it. And it creates an incredibly palpable finale to this album that I probably won't forget. I can't think of too many albums that whip me around this quickly, this wildly. It definitely stands out as something unique in my mind. Yep, that's it. Let's hit some lyrics. I think the main gist of this track is to take big risks. There is a recurring phrase in this track that it says to be free and never fold. Both of these are stated with a second voice coming in after him saying all in. The idea of all in within like a card game is to put all of your money on a single play. High risk, high reward. If you win, you're going to make bank. If you lose, you've lost it all. To be free and never fold. Once again, if we're talking card games, folding is admitting defeat and calling out that you're not going to continue on with the betting process and you're just going to basically surrender in this hand. So to be free, to do whatever you want, to never fold, to play every single hand, regardless if you're going to win or lose, and to constantly put everything all in. Always trying to win big or lose big. That is present in many parts of this track, including the end of the song that says high risk, high reward over and over and over before saying, I'll die before I think like you. I'll take the risk for my reward. This concept of doing it my way, and my way is bombastic, just doing the most extreme thing. That's how I'm going to live my life. But then we have the opening stanza. Don't ever kill that poor boy's dreams. When will you learn his life is not yours? Placing his day, his life, his love, education suffocates. He'll never work a job. He's fed upon and left to rot. He'll never fear of loss. No harm in the will, and it is good. In the concept of being free and making mistakes, I can kind of see this as a contrast to that. Someone who is pampered and lives a sheltered life where they never get to make mistakes. Maybe it's contrasting the narrator's life with someone who is rich, possibly. I can't think of how anyone else would be able to go through without a job in their life. But it also says that he's fed upon and left to rot, which makes it sound like this person is taken advantage of. But it also says that they'll never fear of loss. So I don't know what this comparative other is, what they're trying to represent them to be, other than just in opposition to everything of our narrator's perspective on life and risk-taking. Now, I also mentioned the phrases to be free, all in, never fold, all in, but there's more to this pre-chorus. It also says we're too young to live like this, too young to starve like this. Both of those also echoed with the phrase all in from the side. I don't understand this in relationship to everything else, unless their decisions of high risk, high reward have left them to being penniless, not able to buy food or shelter because of decisions they've made in the past, bad gambles, if you will. Otherwise, I don't get it. Unless I think there could be an argument that life today might encourage people to go all in, and then that causes people to end up in situations where they are starving, where they're living in a way that's inhospitable, and that young people shouldn't be in those positions. But given the finale of this track, that the person says, I'm going to live life the way I want to, bombastic and all in, this doesn't sound like a problem they're concerned with as much as, I don't know. We have another stanza that confounds me. It says, don't ever move your heavy feet, your freedom covered in concrete. Be stubborn, like you're supposed to be. Stand alone, deny a standoff. Wipe your tears, be strong. In time you'll learn to heal from this. You're fragile, just move on. They watched you crash, they let you burn. Now the you in this We've only ever had one other you, and this was the pampered child from the first stanza. Everything else has been an I in here, a first person perspective of things they want to do, the way they're going to live their life. But how does any of this relate to that person? I'm just very lost on what any of this is trying to say. The next section has a back and forth between heartbreak and die a drama. Now, I thought this was a song about life and maybe the difficulties of life, particularly for the youth today. Then I thought it was an ideological song, a motto for someone to live by. Now we're back onto heartbreak, though. This, I'll tell you, never comes back up. Die a drama and heartbreak never come back. But we do have one part of some sort of relationship. In the middle of this track, it says, "Tell her I'm sorry for breaking all of my bones. Are you dead yet? With broken legs, I crawled while you watched me burn. My body is breaking. I lie softly while my body breaks, but I'll take my risks, and I'll take this risk." So we have somebody who cares about our narrator and wants them to live a life more cautiously. And they say, let that person know I'm sorry, but I won't be doing that. From here, we enter to the words, high risk, high reward, into the outro that says, I refuse to die a prisoner. One day these eyes won't open, and that day I will die before I think like you. I refuse to be your prisoner, and I'll take the risk for my reward. Once again, a song very scattered in its messaging. I think the core idea here is that this person's going to live by their own rules, which is loud, which is bombastic, which is risk-taking, that they're going to go big or go home. They don't mind breaking their body as long as they took a big risk, gambled on it, and were hoping to do something that would put them in a better position, but ended up having them fall down the ladder of life a couple of rungs. And that they're cool with this. They have no problem living this life, but they seem to also be upset that people would live like this, that people who are young shouldn't live like this, all in, all the time. But they're also saying that their life is better than people who are sheltered. And see, this is where things get muddied. I think there is a core idea here. It's just not concise. It's not razor honed. It gets muddied by the details that don't matter. Maybe some of y'all have read something in there that I missed, though, something that might tie it together. If you do, and you have a different take on this, as usual, hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. I thought I Love You Too would be sappier, based off of what I got from the music. Again, a mix of positive and negative emotions. And I think it wants to lean in that direction, but there's one part in it that feels opposed to that. Once again, a conflict of messaging. The beginning says this conversation has gone on too long, and I think I'm losing my voice once again, and your medication clearly isn't working. Well, we have somebody who seems pretty upset right now. They're frustrated. Seems like they're ready to just walk away. There's an antagonism to the tone here. The conversation's gone too long. I'm losing my voice again. It's clear your medication isn't working. Like there's irritation to these lines. Verse 2, though, subverts this, and I think this is one of the best parts of this track. It says, but I didn't realize that would be the last time I would look you in your eyes and say I love you too. A realization that what seemed like a everyday moment ended up being the last moment you would spend with someone. Yeah, dude, that's hard. It really is. You think to the last thing that you said to somebody, you treated the time like something you had an infinite resource of and didn't realize that their time was up, and that the last interaction you had with someone isn't what you would have wanted to have been the last one. But nobody treats conversations like the last one. I mean, unless you know, like if they're in the hospital and you can tell like they've been in and out of the hospital, maybe they're a bit older, you might treat every time you meet them, every time you go see them, as the last time. But generally for everyday conversations, especially for someone here who I'm going to assume is on the younger side, talking to somebody who's on the younger side, you don't really expect death. There's a saying about teenagers thinking that they're invincible. And, I don't think it's across the board true, but definitely for a lot of people, it's just this, they know everything, they're invincible, nothing's going to stop them. Their choices are the best. I've been there, dude. I thought I knew everything. I did stupid stuff. I car surfed. I broke bones. I thought I was invincible too. Death isn't something you really think about as a teen, particularly with your teen friends. You have decades of your life ahead of you. And so this moment right here of taking a situation that is irritating for our narrator and realizing that was the final moment they had with someone. Yeah, dude, that sucks. That's kind of relatable for people who have been in that situation, which I'm going to assume if, for people who have lost people, that's going to be kind of common, I think. Again, we don't know when people are leaving, so we can't dictate how we allow conversations and events to go. It says that this would be the last time I would look you in the eyes and say I love you too. I'll digress and I'll cry and I'll cry while I'm doing my best to forget all about you. And then the phrase about you is repeated 5 more times. Digress is a very interesting word there. Digress would be a shift in topic. I think more colloquially, it's used when you are meandering into a very different direction. Like when I brought up Metallica Saint Anger earlier, I digressed into that topic before coming back to talking about this album. So digressing here about noticing that was the last interaction you have with this person and knowing that you're going to spend time crying, and then to say that you'll digress. I don't know, it's a very weird word choice. But then it says that they'll cry while they're doing their best to forget about you. This person meant a lot to our narrator and they don't want to remember them. Very interesting contrast to the message of song 2 about a narrator who wanted someone to remember them. Granted, it wasn't about their death, but it was the death of a relationship. We also have several songs on this album about the death of a relationship or the death of people and missing them, wishing they were back. And here we have one about forgetting someone. Now, I want to take this from a less cynical perspective and view this as another facet of the stages of grief. That maybe for this person, maybe based off of real accounts from one of the lyricists or someone they've talked to or whatever, that they have attempted to forget the person because it's easier than remembering them and dealing with the grief. I don't want to deny that human element here, but it's a very strange idea to put after losing someone. It's even stranger in contrast to verse 3, which says, if I begged you to stay, would it all be okay? If I loved you harder, kissed you harder, told you the truth, would I still be with you? If I begged you to stay, would it all be okay? From this perspective, I can see how maybe if I don't think about them, it won't hurt as bad, could be an idea. Again, I don't want to remove the humanity from this, and especially in youth, sometimes you jump to unhealthy, actually, I'm not even going to say youth. People do jump to unhealthy ways to deal with grief, 100%. It just doesn't make any sense to me here. And it's not the first time a line hasn't made sense to me, but especially with verse 3, showcasing how much they're in pain over this. This is bargaining right here, 100%. If I had done this, would we still be together? Would you still be here? I think this song is supposed to be about the pain of losing someone, but that one line about wanting to forget and doing their best to forget about them. It's an interesting, different idea to put in a song about losing someone, of any artwork of losing someone. Even the song in and of itself is about remembering. Maybe this is a fictional story, but it's still a story told about someone who passed, even if it's a fictional passing, and immortalizing that person through song. There is remembrance baked into that the lyrics are pushing against, which, again, humanness. Now that we've done I Love You Too, it's time to listen to I Hate Your Guts, which... whiplash. That's what this album is. Let's kick it.
Will you hold my hand forever? I don't want to let go of you yet. I've been starting to miss you all after last night when I got to kiss you. I hate your guts, but I miss you so much. If I told you I'm sorry, would that be enough for you, darling? Is that what you want?
Very interesting sound for this title.
I miss your body, everything about you. I know that you're leaving. I can't live without you. Your heart will keep on beating, but we won't be speaking. And I'll always want you to let me be lonely again. 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 I've been angrier than ever, but I know I shouldn't try to fight you on this one. But maybe I'm not the one who's crazy. I hate it when we argue, but I like to speak again. I hate your guts, but I miss you so much. If I told you I'm sorry, would that be enough for you, darling? Is that what you want? Body, everything about you. I know that you're leaving. I can't live without you. Your heart will keep on beating, but we won't be speaking. And I'll always want you. Don't let me be lonely. I know that you think that I'm wrong. I promise you I'm not.
There's no way.
Not.
There's no way that line made it in.
I know
Oh
that
my-
you think that it's gone.
Oh my glob, that's good.
I promise you it's not. It's not. I hate you.
That's the best way to get someone back. I know you think you're right, but you're not. Let's get back together.
I'm sorry,
Oh my jeez.
darling. I miss your smile. I miss all the laughs. Or doesn't it bother you? Why don't you care?
All right, that's just an acoustic ballad. Interesting to have that back to back. Yeah, we have a cool dual meter in here. We have a 3 pulse and a 4 pulse. Yeah! Yeah! Dude, 2 cleans harmonizing and harshes. Yeah, dude, it's so wild because this production is incredibly solid too. And the last 2 tracks have been acoustic and vocals, very easy to mix that. But this one reminds me of, what was it, With Everything in My Heart? Yeah. Yeah, very, very cool way to wrap this up, and a nice way to kind of bring everything together. Much like with, I think it was with Everything in Your Heart, a balanced approach to composition and production. We have the lighter sections, the verses that focus a bit more on guitar riffage, bass riffage, lighter drum parts. The very first verse had a very cool 3/4 polyrhythm going on that I thought was pretty cool. You could count that in either 3 or 4. I showcased both of those with conducting, although I guess you might have thought that it was 3, like 2 bars of 3 and then 2 bars of 4, but no, you can. They're actually interchangeable. You could put either one of those counts within any of the bars and it would fit really well. We have the high contrast between the clean sections and the screaming sections. We have harmonized cleans. We have counterpoint and call and response between harmonized cleans and the screams off on the side. Really great energy there. The energy pushing from the verse, which is a bit lighter, into the very full, heavy chorus, having the guitars come in with some feedback and then landing on these massive buzzsaw guitar tones, just filling in these chords, dun, 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 just 3 solid chords there, filling up all this space, the bass completely, filling in the low end there. The drums, very balanced in the mix. Emphasizing key accent points rather than leaning into more traditional syncopated bass kicks against like a 2 and 4 snare or something very punky like that. And it's this ride you go on. You have your lows and your highs and your lows and your highs. And I think that escalating the energy, moving from a half time to a regular time to a double time feel in those final moments, pushing towards the end of the track, really worked well. This track and track 6, I still think are the 2 that I would show to somebody to get them interested in this. But Falling Apart, I think, is a good way to prepare them for the album because it does have some of the lowest quality production on the album, and the beginning of this album is kind of harsh with the production elements. It's really wild to see the back half of this album clean that up so much, though I assume that part of that may come from the fact that there's so many ballads, mellow tracks and lighter sections in the back half. I still think that some of it comes from experience, but it's impossible to deny the pattern that the back half of this album is consistently better produced, even with the heavier sections in mind. And I'm really curious why that is. I'm still looking at the end of this album's whiplash, though. It wasn't quite as back and forth, since I expected 11 to be heavy and 12 to be soft, and we got the inverse of that. There's also that neat parallel there, too, where I Love You Too and I Hate Your Guts are seemingly opposing in theme. We'll get into the lyrics of I Hate Your Guts and see what's going on there, but are atmospherically very similar. They're both acoustic ballads. Interesting to have them back to back rather than space them out a bit more. But to have that be the penultimate sound before getting into Nothing Matters Anymore, I think generally works. A lot better than going into High Risk, High Reward from I'll Sing For You and having that mellower sound slammed up against the aggression of that metallic hardcore sound there, and then being brought back down to the lows of I Love You Too and I Hate Your Guts. But having those lows and then the subtle movement into the heights of Nothing Matters Anymore works really well, and giving us, almost 8 minutes of acoustic ballad work before landing on probably the best track on the album as far as peaks and valleys, contrast and dynamics, and emotion and layers. Yeah, dude, just a really great way to wrap this up. And I've said this in the past. You want to end your album on your best work, whether that means a really strong penultimate album and a nice resolution, a lower energy final track to wrap things up, or just ending on your best song. You want to leave a positive taste in the listener's mouth so that they can come back for more. They can forget about some of the harsher elements of the album and retain the best parts. This is called recency bias. People tend to remember the beginning and middle of things. Sorry, the beginning and end of things, not so much the mid. That's not recency. Would be what you've seen most recently. But there is also a psychological phenomenon that people tend to remember the beginning and ends of lists more so than the middle. And I don't know if that's recency or not. Regardless, the ending is a memorable part for people. My psychology is a bit rough. But this is a really strong finale. And despite my lack of connecting with this album in places, hearing these final 3 songs made me think, okay, I probably would listen to this again, even though there were certainly parts of this album where I thought to myself, I'm glad I've heard it once. I still want to check out their EP, but I hope they improve on their next one, where this is a one and done situation. And that's good. Like I said, a good ending is going to help the audience want to come back. It's going to improve their favorability towards the work as a whole. A strong ending is way more important than a strong midpoint. And I think this album ends up sticking the landing despite some rough parts in the middle. Let's hit some lyrics on these two. I've tried to start this a couple of times, and every time I start laughing. But I'm just going to have to leave that in there because every time I start to think of the lyrics and the themes, I laugh because it's so ridiculous. This song is ridiculous. This is a person who has no idea how to speak to someone else in a way that's going to make them want to spend time with them. And I'm not saying this as a slight on the lyricist or the vocalist. Music is art. Art allows us to view different perspectives. It's possible that these are not the views of anyone in the band. But this is human conversation, human connection 101. You got to give someone a reason to want to be around you. And holier than thou is not typically a way to invite camaraderie. The chorus says, I hate your guts, but I miss you. If I told you I'm sorry, would that be enough? Is that what you want to hear? I know you're leaving, and I can't live without you. Your heart will keep on beating, but we won't be speaking, and I'll always want you. Don't let me be alone again. We have a relationship that is over, possibly, or maybe on the least, taking a break. And he says, if I said I'm sorry, would that be enough? Well, if you gotta ask what the other person wants, you obviously don't know what the problem is. And if you don't know what the problem is, that's very apparent to the other person. To me, this shows a lot of immaturity on the hands of our narrator. But the immaturity goes further. I never read you the first verse. Let me give you the context to this breakup. I don't want to let go of your hand. I want to hold it forever. I've been starting to miss you all after last night when I got to kiss you. It has been one day. He says, I hate your guts, but I miss you so much. Would saying sorry be enough? Beyond the fact that you just told me you hate me, you screwed up on night 1, and you don't even know what you screwed up on, and you think a vague I'm sorry, well, you don't even think if it's going to be enough. You're asking if that is enough. The narrator is completely clueless of how to have a relationship with someone. The rest of this is all done through the perspective of me, of I. I miss you. If I did this, would that be enough? I know you're leaving. I can't live without you. I won't be speaking to you. I will be lonely. There is no thought put towards the other person. This is a consistent thread on this album. If anyone listens to this and really connects with it, do some soul searching. I'm telling you from the perspective of somebody who would have connected to this as a teenager. There is growth that needs to be had here. Work on yourself before you get in another relationship. Take it from someone who's been there, who's older, who has gone through their own mistakes. I know you think you're right. I thought I was right when I was your age. I sound like my dad. God. Oh, man. Verse 2. In example 2 of how not to speak to someone when you want them to like you, I've been angrier than ever, but I know I shouldn't try to fight you on this one. Maybe, though, I'm not the one who's crazy. I hate when we argue, but I'd like to speak to you again. Hey, you remember that argument we got in the other night? And, that's why you won't talk to me? Yeah, I'm not the one who's crazy here. Obviously, you're the one who doesn't understand things. You want to make up? Yeah, see, I don't think that's really going to get someone in your corner. And the bridge, I can't even read this line. There is no way this made it into the final draft. And everyone working on the lyrics approved it. And then someone sang it, and the recorder engineer guy was like, excellent line, man. That's the best advice I've ever heard. Says, I know you think I'm wrong, but I promise you I'm not. Babe, I know we had a fight. I'm really missing you. I hate your guts, and you're wrong, and you're probably the crazy one in this argument that we had, and there's no way that, you were in the right at all. I really want to get back with you, though. I'm sorry? Is that enough? There is so many shades of wrong with this track, and it cracks me up, and it follows another sin. I mentioned that this is a pretty big issue on this album, that a lot of it is framed within the framework of me and I, how the relationship, end of a relationship, action someone else has done, portrays to me exclusively, me the narrator, and how the other person doesn't matter at all, and when anything about them is brought up, it's their physics, it's their physical, it's their body. I was trying to find a nicer way to say that. I skipped a line in the chorus. After he says, if I told you I'm sorry, would that be enough? Is that what you want to hear? He says, I miss your body. Everything about you. Really? How about you list me one of those everythings? How about you should have used that instead of your body? Because I promise you, you probably, when you, as a narrator, again, not taking jabs at the lyricists here, but when you say that, you might think that you're telling this person they're beautiful. What they're hearing is, I'm sorry and I still want to have sex with you. Can we do that? Just don't. Just don't. When you tell somebody that you miss them, how about you tell something about their character, something they have control over, who they are, not what they are, that you miss. I don't know why I'm giving dating advice. This is music reactions. But this album is just really ticking me off in this regard. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of self-reflection going on in here. I'm hoping that maybe someone will hear some of this and improve themselves earlier than I got around to improving myself in these regards. If I had someone like me 20 years ago, I might have done better in the relationship category than I did. Now, ultimately, it all worked out in the end. I'm really glad where I landed with relationships, and I have a phenomenal kid. And there's it's the butterfly effect. It changes everything. I'm happy with my life the way it turned out. I don't want to change any of that because who knows what else it changes. But I made a lot of mistakes, and maybe some of you won't. Hopefully. Don't do an I'm sorry letter, speech, song like this. Just don't. And Nothing Matters Anymore is a really neat way to wrap this up by presenting a new perspective. So much of this album is pain. Pain of being in a relationship you don't want to be in, pain of not being in a relationship you do want to be in, the pain of being betrayed, the pain of losing people. Here we have a song that's positive. It is about being old and looking back at your life and being happy with it because of the people who were in it, which does fit really well with the general themes of human connection and relationships throughout this album. It is a perspective leap, moving from negativity and pain towards positivity and joy, but it is thematically consistent, still focusing on people. I think that's a really intelligent way to frame this finale. It says, one day we'll be old and they won't give a shit. What a beautiful life we live. We have everything because everything is all in our friends. We built this on love. We built this on everything. Thank God for you. I'd sacrifice my life for you guys because I know one day we'll look back and say that nothing matters anymore. We prevailed. Look, we killed the beast. I don't know what the beast line is all about, but the general sentiment here is that the people in our lives are the ones that support us. And when we're old, we're going to look back on the memories with these people and feel like we have lived a fulfilled life, regardless of anything else, that we'll have people in our lives that make them feel full and well lived. That more important than experiences, more important than 9-to-5 jobs and working our bodies to the bone, more important than the lows in our life, we will still feel like we have lived a life worth living because of what we have done with the people in it. I really like that. There even says that there's going to be ups and downs, but it's worth it. It says a laugh and a smile, maybe a black eye or two, but I'd still sacrifice my life for you guys. I love that. It's a beautiful track. Then out of nowhere, we have the bridge, which says, oh my goodness, I'm proud to say I'm yours. And that's it. We go back to the chorus, which is about building things with the people we love, and laughs and smiles, black eyes, sacrifice my life for y'all. He says, if this is all I get, I'm more than fine with that. And I kind of think that matches the general sentiment in this album about romantic lovers. They are a footnote against your friends. And I may be completely off in this, but assuming that this is from a heteronormative perspective here, we have an album where hanging out with the guys is the best of times and hanging out with women is stressful and painful, and a footnote, something about enjoying their body and glad to say that they're yours, you're in this relationship, but honestly, the only big part is hanging out with the guys. Honestly, if they had left that, oh my goodness, I'm proud to say I'm yours, out of this track, it would have been perfect. And I understand the purpose of it is that the person you choose to be with romantically is a part of your life just as much as everyone else, and that you want to include them in your song about the people around me make me happy. But maybe it should have been more than just that line. Because when you say I'd sacrifice my life for you guys, that feels more of like the guys, you know, your friends. Not the old ball and chain, which is how this album feels like it reference. Oh, I have to add them in there, they'll be mad. Oh, dude, this turned into like a little bit of a boomer joke right here. I don't know, dude. These last two tracks lyrically crack me up. The rest of it is ranging from fine to cringe, but these last two is just, how did some of these lines make it through the writing process? Love Letter, if you're watching this, I'm sorry if you have felt attacked by any of this. It's just, consciously or not, this album has a leaning and a perspective on romance that just generally isn't healthy. And these last two songs just really leaned into some absurdities of that viewpoint. Again, I'm not attributing these viewpoints to you. I'm not saying y'all are like this, but it is some stuff that has crept through in the cracks of pretty much every facet of this album. And for me, at least, it's kind of put a dark tinge on it. I do love some tracks on this. With Everything in My Heart, Nothing Matters Anymore, even as absurd as it is, I Hate Your Guts is a well done track as far as vocal and acoustic guitar, two-part song, a little ballad there. But it's going to be really tough for me to come back to this album lyrically, which is a bit of a shame because I do enjoy it. I think it is a strong showcasing of some modern throwback to 2000s emo. And I want to like it. I really do. But it does feel like a first album. There's some rough edges around here, and I really look forward to a second and a third album from these guys, and even more, you know, if they want to keep doing it, and seeing how they grow. Because I think they have a lot of chops. They have a lot of, what's that word? Not possibility, but, dang, why can't I think of that word? Potential. They have a lot of potential, and I'd love to see where they take that. So then, these are my thoughts on Love Letters. What is this album called? You Look Good in Red. It's again looking on looks. Very, very visual focused on their relationships across this album. Let me know what you thought of this. Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this album? Do you have interpretations to any of the songs that confounded me, that kind of escaped my grasp of understanding? Let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. That is 1 hour earlier UTC-wise than it was in past weeks. That's because the US entered daylight saving time. So make sure you adjust your alarms, your calendars, your whatever you do to be ready for that accordingly. Because I know some people also switch to daylight saving time. Some countries and regions don't. So maybe it'll change for you. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll change for you for a couple weeks and then it'll go back to normal. So just be ready for that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.